Hello everyone! My favorite Python and C++ editor is Visual Studio Code, or briefly VS Code. I use VS Code on my Windows and Linux Ubuntu computers as well as on my Raspberry Pi 5. It is simple to use and it has a great syntax highlighting and debugging frameworks. Furthermore, it's completely free. In addition to this, it is lightweight. You can run VS Code even on Raspberry Pi 5. Since you're watching this tutorial, most likely you also find Visual Studio Code to be one of the best Python and C++ editors. Consequently, in this tutorial, I will explain how to install Visual Studio Code on Linux Ubuntu. For the reference, I'm using Linux Ubuntu 24.04. However, everything explained in this video tutorial applies to other versions of Linux Ubuntu. For example, it applies to Linux Ubuntu 22.04. I will also explain how to set up Python and how to run Python files and Python scripts in Visual Studio Code. Okay, let's start. First of all, open Google and search for VS Code Linux Ubuntu. And then click on the official website. Then over here, you need to find installation instructions for Linux. You can just click over here. Now, a lot of people who are not experienced with Linux Ubuntu will blindly follow these instructions. Now, here is one very important thing. Before you run any command, update and upgrade. This is very important. Consequently, let's open a terminal and let's type these commands: sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. You can also do apt-get, it doesn't matter. Press enter, enter your password, and that's it. And now everything is being updated and upgraded. Okay, so be patient. This will take maybe even a minute. Or maybe even more, depending how often do you run these commands. After updating and upgrading all the packages, now we can proceed further. The idea over here is to download this file and then to run this command. So let's click here to download the file. The download process should automatically start. And meanwhile, let's just copy this command. Let's see the download progress. Here it is. Let's verify that the file is downloaded. Usually the files are by default placed in the downloads folder. So here is the file. Good. Next, let's go back to the terminal. And let me resize this terminal. First of all, let's go to the home folder. Then let's go to the download folder. You can just type download and tab, and let's list all the file. And here's the file, very important file. It's there. So let's now install this file. To install this file, you just need to paste the command. Then over here, erase this thing and just copy this part over here, paste it here, and press enter. Let's see what will happen. Here you would be asked a question. Let me now zoom in. Actually, now let me resize it. Okay. At certain point, you might be asked to press yes or to do something like this. However, at the end, this is what you will get. You see here some warning. However, you can just ignore this warning. Now, let's verify that Visual Studio Code is installed. So how do you run Visual Studio Code? There are two approaches. The first approach that I don't like is to click here and search for code, and you will see this famous Visual Studio Code icon. You can start it, and this is the first approach. Okay, now I don't like that approach. What do I do usually? I run it from my terminal. So open a terminal, and in the terminal you can type code dot. What does this code dot mean? This means that you are starting Visual Studio Code from this particular directory or folder, which means that Visual Studio Code will think that this is your workspace directory. This is very important when you're trying to install different software or run some Python scripts. And you will be asked this: do you trust the authors? Yes, I trust. Okay, Let's now set up Visual Studio Code. Over here, you will be asked several things. Do you want to use AF features with Copilot for free? I don't like Copilot. You can choose your theme. You can select other things. However, I will mark it done and then I will show you how to manually adjust everything. The first thing that you need to do is to adjust the font size. I really don't like the small font size when I type something, so let's learn how to do that. Okay, so click on File, then click on Preferences and click on Settings. And over here, search for font. And over here, I usually like to use 20 as the size of the font when I write something. Okay, and then just press Enter, and that's it. So let's verify that everything is fine by clicking on New File. Let's call the file test.py. Let's save it in the Downloads folder or in some other folder, and now when you type, you can see that the font is larger. Let's additionally increase the font, for example, again, settings, and let's font, and let's put, for example, 24. 24 might not be bad. So let me see now what happens. Perfect. So you can nicely see what I'm typing over here. Good. Next, we need to install a Python extension for Visual Studio Code. Note over here that we are not installing Python inside of Visual Studio Code. We are just installing a Python extension such that Visual Studio Code can recognize that we are typing Python code and it can help us with the highlighting and with debugging. So let's do that. First of all, click on File, and over here you need to find the option Extensions. So how to find the options extensions? So let's see. If you see Preferences and if you click on Extension, you will see this window over here, and search for Python. And let's see, click over here. This is the Microsoft's Python extension for VS Code. And click on Install to install it. Now it's being installed, and after some time you will see that the Install button is being updated. Good. Now we have the Python extension. So let's go back to our code. So let's test, can we execute a simple Python file? Before you do that, you have to make sure that Python is installed on your Linux Ubuntu system. Okay, first of all, keep in mind that if you install Linux Ubuntu with default options, Python will be installed together with Linux Ubuntu distribution. However, let's still verify it. So click here and search for terminal. And over here in the terminal window, you should try to type first this, Python, or first which Python. And nothing happens. So do you have or not Python on your system? Well, since you're on Linux Ubuntu, you should type this, which Python 3, and most likely Python is installed, and you will see this response. This is the path to the installation folder of Python in our system. Another thing to verify is to type something like this to see the exact version. You can see that I'm running Python 3.12.3. Good. Now let's go back to Visual Studio Code and let's try to write the test file. For example, let's assign A is 4, B, let's say B is 7, and C is equal to A plus B, and let's print the result, print C. So now how to execute this file? That is how to call the Python interpreter. Well, very easy. First of all, you need to tell to Visual Studio Code which Python version to use. To do that, press and hold Ctrl, Shift, and P, and then search Python, select interpreter. And if you click here, you will see that Visual Studio Code was able to recognize all the Python scripts, better to say Python interpreters installed on your system. And you can see these two, which are actually the same. So let's, for example, click on this one over here, and to run the code, simply click here, and the code will be executed over here in the terminal. And another thing to keep in mind, you can see over here what's being called. You're actually calling Python 3 from the binary folder. Okay, keep in mind that. However, this is not a proper and disciplined approach and a way for running Python scripts in Visual Studio Code. Let me show you one thing. For example, let's say that we want to import NumPy and that we want to test NumPy by typing this. Let's just correctly do the steps. Import NumPy as NP, and then let's type this NumPy array, for example 1, 2, 3, and then let's say that B, or let's say this is A1, B1 is A1 multiplied by 3, and let's print B1. And let's try to execute this. Okay, so what's happening? No module named NumPy. So what's the issue? Well, the issue is that in our base Python environment, which we are currently calling, we didn't install the module NumPy. Now, let me show you what's the proper way for running code in Visual Studio Code. The idea is to create a Python virtual environment and to install all the packages, libraries, and modules in the Python virtual environment. So let's do that. Close this and let's start from scratch. So what we need to do, we need to open a new terminal. Let's click over here. Let's go to the home folder, and in this home folder, let's create our workspace folder. I will call it test Python. So let's go to the test Python, and inside of this folder, let's call Visual Studio Code. However, before we do that, let's create a Python virtual environment. First of all, you need to execute this command, which will install the function, or better to say the command, for creating Python virtual environments. Here you need to specify your Python version, in my case it's 3.12, and just run this command. Most likely it's already being installed, as you can see over here. Next, let's create Python virtual environment. To create the Python virtual environment, you need to execute this command. This command will create a Python virtual environment called environment1, and here you can change the name. You can call it as you wish. So press enter and wait until the environment is created, and if you type this command, you will see this folder. This folder will contain all the configuration files of your Python virtual environment. The next step is to activate the Python virtual environment. To do that, simply execute this command, and you will see over here environment1, which means that the Python virtual environment is active. The next step is to start Visual Studio Code, so simply type code dot, and let's write our file. Now, meanwhile, while code is running over here, let's install the module we want. So let's install pip install NumPy. And in this way, we installed NumPy inside of our virtual environment. If you type pip list, you will see NumPy over here. Now, here's the catch. Here we will write a simple code. Let's click new file. Let's call the file test1.py. Let's save it in this folder. And over here, let's type import NumPy as NP. And let's, for example, say A is NumPy array, and then let's specify 1, 2, 3. And now let's say B is equal to times A, and let's print B over here. Okay, so basically that's it. Now, here comes the crucial part. You need to tell to Visual Studio Code to use the interpreter, that is the Python interpreter, from this virtual environment. This is very important. Okay, to do that, again, Control-Shift-P, then Python, select interpreter, click, and over here, look what changed. You will have this option, environment1 binary Python. So this script, or better to say, this interpreter, is inside of this folder. So let's navigate just to make sure that the file is there. So let's see, cd, so let's type this thing, environment1 bin for binaries, and let's see what do we have over here. Do we have Python? Yes, here is the file. You can see all of them, they point out to similar thing. Excellent, very good. Okay, so let's select this one, and now if you click here, you will be able to execute this code with no problems, since Visual Studio Code will run a Python interpreter that will recognize that NumPy is installed in our virtual environment. Okay, that's all for today, and thanks for watching.